Chapter 19. Shifting Shadows. Rain swept in from the east, drawing a curtain of silver across the city's fractured skyline. Selene peered through a murky window in the abandoned electronics shop, counting the droplets that streaked the glass. Each one felt like a ticking second, a reminder of how little time they had left before illusions and fear swallowed everything. She turned to face the watchers clustered behind her. Tension rippled through their ranks, every face creased with worry or exhaustion. In the glow of a single lantern, Draven's gaze flicked between a dog-eared city map and the decrypted notes about Annex Delta, the rumored facility holding captive Dreamweavers. A hush held the group, broken only by the patter of rain and the low static from Victor's battered laptop. "Everyone set?" Draven asked quietly, voice echoing in the wide, empty shop. He'd repeated the question multiple times that morning, each time searching for any crack in their resolve. Ava, leaning on her makeshift crutch, managed a taut nod. "We can't delay. If the meltdown illusions keep tearing at reality, the city could slip into full panic soon, and those detainees might become the regime's scapegoats, or worse, lab rats, for the next wave of dream tech." Selene shivered, hugging her arms. All night stray illusions had hovered at the edges of her vision, phantasms of past horrors, flickers of half-familiar faces, even the faint echo of her mother's lullaby. Each time, she fought back a surge of dread. She dreaded the thought of illusions, setting watchers against each other, or forcing them into nightmares they couldn't escape. The meltdown had dredged up every hidden fear, giving it ephemeral shape. Ethan sidled close, offering her a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder. "We'll find them," he said, voice steady. "Your parents, the others, all of them, will bring them back." She allowed herself a faint smile. That hope was what fueled her. Without it, the meltdown illusions and the daily risk of betrayal would have crushed her spirit long ago. They left the electronics shop in small clusters, quiet as wraiths beneath the relentless rain. Draven led the main column, his eyes scanning every alley for flickers of movement. Each time, a shape swirled at the corner of Selene's gaze, perhaps an illusory dog, or the silhouette of a child. She clenched her fists, willing it away. The meltdown had turned the city into a dream-laced labyrinth, illusions drifting like ghosts across empty streets. Victor scouted ahead, decrypting security feeds from his portable rig to track enforcer patrols. On his signal, the watchers slipped between half-collapsed buildings, each step carefully placed on rain-slick ground. In the distance, the hum of sirens rose and fell, but it was impossible to tell if they were heading for the watchers or some other crisis sparked by illusions. The tension in the group was palpable. Whispers circulated about the traitor among them, the question still unanswered. Who kept giving the regime their safe house coordinates? With the meltdown illusions running rampant, paranoia ran high. Every rustle behind them made watchers flinch, half expecting a bullet or an enforcer's disruptor rod. Selene's illusions couldn't quell that fear. If anything, they sometimes sharpened it. They reconvened at an abandoned subway entrance near the city's outskirts, an old station with shattered turnstiles leading down into stale darkness. Draven waved them inside, checking the coordinates scribbled from the newly decoded logs. "According to these notes, Annex Delta is built over a defunct subway line. We can approach from below if the tunnels aren't completely collapsed or flooded." Ava exhaled, adjusting her crutch on the slippery stairs. "Then we avoid the main roads and upper security. Good. If the meltdown illusions are thick in the city, maybe it'll distract the enforcer's topside." Selene felt her chest tighten, or trap us underground with illusions in the dark. She glanced at Ethan, reading the same concern in his eyes. They pressed on anyway. The watchers filed down, flashlights cutting through the musty gloom. Water dripped from the ceiling, forming shallow pools along the cracked tiles. Faint echoes of their footsteps reverberated in a haunting chorus, as though something lurked beyond the next bend. In the flicker of the flashlights, ephemeral shapes sometimes materialized, faces pressed in silent screams against the walls, or fleeting shadows dancing across the old tracks. Selene's heart lurched with each one. She clenched her fists, focusing on the real textures of damp air, the chill seeping through her jacket, the firm ground underfoot. Stay anchored. Don't let illusions hijack your senses. After a half-hour of careful progress, the watchers halted at a rusted junction. Victor tapped his phone. If the logs are correct, we're beneath Annex Delta. We should find a vertical conduit or old maintenance shaft leading up into the facility. Draven signaled for quiet, and watchers extinguished, all but a single flashlight. Selene's pulse hammered in her ears. If the meltdown illusions had compromised enforcer routines, it might give them an advantage, but it also meant no one truly knew what lay ahead. The meltdown might have twisted Annex Delta's dream tech, or left captive Dreamweavers in dangerous delirium. They found the maintenance hatch by faint braille-like signage. The watchers worked in tense silence to pry it open, stepping into a narrower corridor. A stale chemical odor wafted down, reminiscent of antiseptics and old electronics. Selene gagged slightly, recalling the cold sterility of the Nexus engine chamber. She prayed this place wasn't as monstrous. One watcher inched forward, pistol raised. The corridor ended at a sealed door with a flickering keypad. The watchers tensed, bracing for alarms or cameras. But no siren blared. Instead, an eerie hush pressed in. Draven used a small hacking device on the keypad, and the door slid open with a groan. Selene's breath caught as they stepped into a dimly lit subterranean space, a labyrinth of glass-walled cells, blinking monitors, and cables snaking across the floor. The watchers fanned out, weapons ready. The meltdown illusions flickered in corners, ghosts of who knew what drifting near the glass. Or were they illusions at all? She caught glimpses of pale figures behind those glass walls, some lying motionless, some pacing aimlessly. Ava gasped. Gods, are they Dreamweavers? Selene's stomach lurched. The assimilation logs had spoken of detainees kept in sedation. Now these glass cells, half lit with flickering readouts, made the Watcher's infiltration of the Nexus engine seem like child's play. The meltdown illusions glimmered around each cell, warping the interior like half-formed nightmares. She squinted at one occupant, a gaunt man with vacant eyes, tethered to tubes that pulsed with faint light. She shuddered. Draven moved quickly, checking the monitors. They're all in some suspended dream state, partial sedation, partial meltdown effect. If we free them abruptly, they might lash out or collapse. We have to be careful. Selene's heart thundered. She scanned each cell, dread warring with urgent hope. Could her parents be among them? Her illusions flickered at the edges of her vision, nearly conjuring shapes that danced behind the glass. She forced them down, stepping carefully from cell to cell, searching for familiar faces in the gloom. Ethan kept pace, offering wordless support. At last, Selene paused, before a cell door labeled only with a numeric code that matched old references. Inside, 2 figures lay on cots, bodies drawn and pale. Their hair was streaked with silver, eyes closed behind sedation masks. She felt tears prick her eyes. Some intangible recognition stirred. Even if she'd last seen them as a child, something in her gut told her, they're my parents. Her stomach twisted in both terror and relief. She wanted to rush in, but Draven yanked her back gently. We can't just open it. They're tied to sedation lines. We need to power down the system carefully or risk shock to their minds. Selene nodded, tears blurring her vision. Then hurry. They set watchers to guard the corridor. Draven and Victor huddled around a central console bristling with half-dead monitors. The meltdown illusions caused the screens to flicker with random shapes and dream-coded text. Carefully they deciphered controls, severing sedation feeds in a slow, measured sequence. Each beep on the console felt like thunder in Selene's ears. Meanwhile, illusions crawled up the walls, shapes swirling at the corners of the watcher's eyes. Ava held them at bay with an empathic dampening field, face contorted in strain. Sweat trickled down her neck, but she refused to falter. Not now, not when we're so close, she muttered through clenched teeth. Finally, Draven let out a breath. I've isolated sedation for that cell." He beckoned to Selene. "The door should open on manual override. Then we detach them from the sedation harness slowly." Heart thundering, Selene moved to the cell's keypad. She keyed in the sequence, and the door hissed open. Inside, the two unconscious Dreamweavers barely stirred. The meltdown illusions sparked across the room like flickering arcs of color. She swallowed, stepping in with Ethan at her side. Gently, they unfastened the sedation lines from each limp form, careful not to jar them. A faint beep signaled the sedation halt. Seconds stretched. The older man stirred first, eyes fluttering open, glassy, disoriented. He tried to speak, but only a hoarse croak emerged. Selene's vision blurred with tears. She recognized faint traces of his features, a memory of a father's protective arms. The woman, similarly frail, jerked awake in confusion. They stared at Selene with dawning recognition, or perhaps only an innate bond that bridged years of sedation. She choked back a sob. "They live." Ethan cleared his throat gentle. "We'll get you out, it's okay." No sooner had he spoken than an alarm began to wail from the console. Enforcers. The meltdown illusions abruptly intensified, swirling as though feeding on the sudden spike in fear. Draven's voice echoed from the corridor. "We have inbound hostiles, 5 or 6 heavily armed." A surge of dread crashed over Selene. They had to protect these Dreamweavers, her parents, and everyone else in the facility. But illusions twisted the air, threatening to trap them in nightmares. If the Watchers couldn't hold off the Enforcers, all would be lost. She closed her eyes, letting Oneiric Fusion stir in her chest. Maybe illusions alone couldn't save them, but if she could stabilize them for a final push. "Selene," Ethan urged, "we have to move. Now." Her parents blinked at her, blinking away sedation. They seemed to sense her presence, though no words formed. Tears stung her eyes. She slid her arms under her father's shoulders, Ethan helping with her mother. They would guide them out, illusions or not, meltdown or not. In the corridor, the Watchers braced for a fight. Shifting shadows at the far end told them the Enforcers were near. Selene's illusions flared, bending the meltdown's chaos into a defensive wave. If they were to save these 2 Dreamweavers, and all the others still captive, they'd need every shred of unity and cunning they could muster. In that moment, as the meltdown illusions crackled, the Watchers readied themselves. Selene clutched her parents, heart pounding with relief and terror. The path ahead was fraught with shadows, but revelations had lit the way forward. No matter the cost, they would free the forcibly assimilated Dreamweavers and face the meltdown's fury. All that remained was to see if they could outrun the Enforcers and the traitor, long enough to shape a dream of freedom in a world teetering on the brink.